Hi everyone, my name is Molly Jane, and today I'm going to be talking about my final project for Honors Web and Mobile App Development called Marginal. To get started, this is my kind of catchphrase for Marginal, making poetry for everyone line by line. And I'll talk about what that means a little bit more in just a little bit. But before that, a little bit about who I am. Again, my name is Molly. I'm a senior at RVR. I'm actually a creative writing major, but I've taken a bunch of computer science classes and I'm super involved in the IT department, so I consider myself at all times an IT minor. On very specific days, a double major. It's up for debate at any moment. I am also a Linux enthusiast, just a fun fact, although unfortunately I'm filming this on a Windows computer, but we'll fix that later. And there is a picture of me at the presentation with my project. You can see my board, and on the computer screen is Marginal, which I'll be showing you in just a minute. If you're interested, here's a link to my GitHub. It has all of the code for this project. So if you want to poke around in there and see the actual back end of how I made it, that's in there. So a little bit about Marginal. It combines features of websites like the Poetry Foundation, that is basically just a huge database of poems that you can read, and websites like Genius Lyrics, where people can read song lyrics and leave annotations on every single line and analyze and kind of engage with it in a social media-like platform. So combining those two kind of ideas, Marginal is a place where people can browse poetry and find new poems and then read them and put comments on either the whole poem or, like Genius Lyrics, individual lines. So you can share your understanding, your confusion if you need help, how much you love a line, how much you hate a line. Whatever you think about poetry, you can share it on Marginal. A little bit about why I wanted to make this project. Honestly, I came up with this idea because this is something that I would want to have. As a writer, I'm super into poetry. I write poetry all the time, but I've noticed a lot of the times other people aren't as interested in poetry. And I thought that it would be really cool to have a place like Genius Lyrics, which I use all the time, and I love reading people's thoughts and analyzations of songs. I thought it'd be really cool to have some place that you could obsess over lines of poetry the same way you do songs. And if I'm being totally honest, I came up with this idea when I was writing my own poetry, and I wrote a line that I thought was really good. And I was like, oh man, I wish there was a place where people would be like, that's so cool, I want that on a tote bag, like they do for song lyrics. So I thought, why not make it? And then as I was making it, I realized another benefit of this is that hopefully it makes poetry a little less intimidating, because, as I said, not a lot of people are super into poetry, and a lot of people see it as this, like, huge, scary thing, but really, poetry started as an art form like songs or books that anyone could read, and it was supposed to express your emotions. So I'm hoping that ultimately an app like this or a website like this could help bring poetry back to that and make people a little more understanding and excited about poetry. So the target users for my app are, in short, everyone. But to explain that a little bit, it's great for people interested in poetry like me, because you already have that background and you have a place to put out your love for poetry and your interest and interact with people easily who are also interested in poetry. It's also great if you're just kind of so-so, like meh, about poetry, because then maybe you can see it as something a little more exciting and actually see it as something super enjoyable instead of just like English homework. And then it also could be great for people who like really don't like poetry or absolutely don't understand it, because it adds this kind of social approach to it, and it can make it way easier for you to approach the poems, ask questions, get other interactions, and start to see something in it other than just this really confusing language. So, in short, everyone can use this. And then here's just a little bit of what you can do with it. I will go way more into this in my demonstration, But some of the ideas of how you would use this, like in everyday life or maybe in an English class, is that you could show off your love for poems, you could see other people's interpretations or get help understanding it. You can talk to other people who love poetry if you already like it, or maybe even become someone who's more into poetry once you see why other people are so interested in it. And overall, you will be able to use this website to treat poetry as something fun and communal instead of this inaccessible art form that's only for writers and scholars and people who are very poetry minded. So that's the concept of my app. Now I'm going to show you the actual website. So now I'm going to show you around my actual website. So as you can maybe see, I am no longer, thank God, on a Windows machine. I'm using a Linux virtual machine right now. Ideally, in the future, like hopefully soon, I'll have this website hosted somewhere, so you'll be able to just go to a URL and see it, but for now, it's just running on locally on this virtual machine, but still works just as fine. So the first thing you see when you go to Marginal, which you can click, right now we're on a specific poem, but you can click here on the name of the website to go home. You can also click in the nav bar the home button, and it'll take you to the home page. And as you can see, it has a poem on the page, and as you just saw, every time you load this page, it actually is going to give you a different poem. So if I reload the page right now, it's going to give you a different random poem. And the idea behind that is kind of, if you just come here and want to look at a poem, you can find a random one, or even just if you're not coming to just browse poems, it'll still expose you to more poetry and kind of maybe catch your attention once in a while. So that's all that's on the home page for now. I'd like to add some other things in the future. I'm honestly not quite sure what I would want to add on there, but I'm thinking maybe something about new annotations or something like that, just to make it a little more interesting. But for now, you just have the random poem. And that was actually getting that random poem and the poems in general was one of the earlier struggles that I had on this website, especially since it's the whole idea of the website. Originally, I was thinking I would store poems in a database of some sort, but I actually found this really great website, poetrydb.org, that is an API, and it's super easy to grab poems from, and they actually have a function to, like, an ability to grab a random poem from it, so that's how I'm getting this. So, first I had to figure out that I wanted to do that in the first place, and then there was a bit of a learning curve, or even more of a logic curve of figuring out how to grab that from the API, and I ended up grabbing that within the Python file and then passing it to the HTML template for this page, but there was a little bit of fiddling around with that to figure it out. So once you go from the home page, obviously you want to start looking at some poems. So you can browse by poems, and you can get to all of this in the nav bar. So if you click on poems, it'll give you here a list of poems alphabetically. It does have special characters. It counts as before alphabetical, so it seems a little out of alphabetical when you look at it, but it technically is. And this is another thing similar to the homepage. If I keep working on this website, I'd like to add something like maybe the author of the poem or how many annotations there and comments there are on each poem on this page, just to give you a little more information and just make it visually more interesting. But for now, you can browse all of the poems alphabetically. It goes on for a very long time. I also would think about adding pages just so it's a little less of an overwhelming list. And then from here, you can click on a poem and it'll take you to the individual page for a poem, which I will break down in a minute, but here's a little teaser of what the poem page looks like. And from here, you can go back to poems, and it'll take you back to that page. Another way you can look at the poems is by authors. So if you know that there's a certain author that you like or that you want to look into, you can find them on here. Same thing, it's a list of authors, and again, I would be interested in somehow adding more information on them. The only problem with that is I would have to find the information elsewhere, because the database, or the API that I got it from, doesn't have that much on the authors, but it's still useful. So from here, you can click on an author, and it'll bring you to another page that will show you all of the poems written only by that author. And then from there, same thing as the poem page, you can click on it and it'll take you to the poems. And from here on the poem page, you can also click on the author's name and it will take you back to that page that lists all of the author's poems. And then from there, if you want to go further back, you can go back to authors and browse them like that. But say you have a specific idea of a poem you want. There's also a search bar, and this will search for poems or authors. So, for example, I'm going to look for Shakespeare. I like Shakespeare. I think he's cool. Should hit search. That would help. And now it's going to show results for Shakespeare. So you'll see here we actually have a poem about Shakespeare, which is kind of cool. I wasn't expecting to find that. And we have the author here. So I can click on it and I can look through this, but maybe, oh, I remembered a sonnet that I want to look up. One of my favorite pieces by Shakespeare, actually. And I don't really remember what it's called, but I remember that Baron is somewhere in the title. So I'm going to look that up. And this is it. Sonnet 76. Why is my verse so barren of new pride? So it will actually search for any word in the title. So you don't need to know the whole title. If you just know one word in it, or if I had just looked up sonnet, it'll bring up anything that has that in the title. So now I'm on the page for Sonnet 76. If you are not familiar with this poem, I highly recommend that you read it. It's a very good poem. I like it a lot. And now I'll walk you through how you can see the annotations on here. So as you see on here, we have the title, the author, and then the actual poem. And there are these lines here that are highlighted in gray. That means that there's already an annotation on them. So if I click here on this first annotation, you can see my handy dandy test there. But it will highlight this line in pink to show you that you have that open. So just so you can kind of visually track which line that this goes with. And this is yet another thing I would maybe design a bit differently. But for now, I think it's pretty clear which one you're looking at with the highlight. And that also works the same on an unannotated one. You just click on the line, still highlight it in pink, and then click on it again to close it. And as you can see, I'm actually not logged in as anyone right now, but I can still see the annotations from this user test. And at the bottom, we also have this comment section. And you can see test also left a comment on here for the whole poem. And they said, cool poem. So it's pretty cool. I can see what they're saying. So you can see kind of the social media aspect coming with this. Now, let's say I'm reading this and I want to add that I think it's interesting that there's a question at the beginning. So I can put like, rhetorical question. Cool start. So I go to post this. And that's actually, if you're not logged in, going to redirect you to the login, because you don't have to be logged in to see the annotation, so anyone can see that. But if you want to make an annotation or comment, you have to log in so people know who made it. So here's the login page. And under here, we actually have a link. Don't have an account? Register here. So I'm going to set up another account. Let's call this one video, since we're filming a video. And I'm going to use the most secure password there ever is. You're never going to guess what it is. And I'm going to register. So now you're registered, and just to be extra secure, it makes you log in one more time. So don't forget your password as soon as you register. And now we're logged in. And this takes you to the dashboard, which as of right now just tells you that you're logged in as whatever user you're logged in as. You can also see in the top, it has added the dashboard there, and it'll also say on anything, hello video, just to remind you who you're logged in as. There's a logout button here. I'm not going to log out right now so I can demonstrate the annotating function. This is another thing I'd like to add more things on here. Most of what I want to change on this website is just adding features and cleaning it up. But I think it'd be cool if you could add something like the annotations you put, or maybe if I add a like system later on, like likes that you've gotten, or maybe saved poems, something like that, just to make it a little more personal. But for now, it just is a nice confirmation that you're logged in. Now, unfortunately, when you log in, it doesn't redirect you back to where you were if you're making an annotation. Another thing I'd like to fix, but that was a little more complicated. So for now, we're just going to have to search for that poem and go back to it. And as I'm talking, another thing that was kind of a general issue, or not issues, not even a struggle necessarily with this project, was just kind of learning and deciding the scope of it, because I had really big ideas for this project. One of the things that I was interested in adding was having people be able to make their own poetry and upload it on here, but ultimately there were things that I just had to cut for now, just to fit it into this time that we had, and so that everything I had was as clean as possible instead of just kind of having a bunch of things thrown together. So there are definitely things I'd want to add, making it a little more social, making like ads that you could reply to, comments, stuff like that. But that was definitely something that was interesting to have to deal with in making this application. Another thing while we're talking about struggles, was one of the things I learned, and this kind of goes with the general struggle of learning the language in the process. This is written in Python using Flask, and I knew Python pretty well before this, and I knew like a good amount of HTML and all that, but it was definitely a learning curve with Flask and how to put it all together. So, for example, for this to bring up the poem that you need, obviously it has in the URL the poem you're looking at. But I kind of had to learn where you needed to put that in the URL. So like if you go to the read thing in the function, I didn't know when you pass in something to a function to generate a page, you have to include it in the URL. So that's just like one of those little things that I had to learn about while I was working on this project. So finally, we're back on the poem. We can make this annotation. So I'm going to click on this again. I'm going to write my comment again. Oh, look, it saved it. That's nice. Rhetorical question. Cool start. Post. So, here's another thing I would want to fix. As you see, when you post it, it does reload the page, which closes it. It's really not an issue. It just personally kind of annoys me. Maybe you wouldn't have noticed, and I just pointed out something, so my fault. But that's something I want to fix, and I have a kind of idea, and I tried to do it, but ultimately, it wasn't that annoying that I had to fix it. But anyways, you click on it, and you will now see that video has made a comment. We've made a comment. So anyone will be able to see that annotation, and it works the same way. Let's just make a comment on here too. Favorite. We'll just make a comment just for funsies. And it works the same way, again, closes the annotation, but puts a comment down there. And you'll notice, since we are logged in as video, there's this button next to this, but not next to text. That is because this button allows us to delete annotations, and same thing on the comment. So let's demonstrate that right now. If I go here and I click delete, it's going to delete the annotation. You click on this, and it's gone. And you are only able to do that if it is your own annotation, so that people can't go around and delete everything that you've done. So that's really the core of the website. Overall, I was pretty lucky. I didn't have many other struggles. There were little things like I had to do something very specific, like to get the white space in some poems, like between stanzas, they'll have a white space, and I had to put an if statement that would check if that was supposed to be there. And like the nav bar wanted to stack them all on top of each other for some reason. But ultimately, most of my struggles were just small things that I either had to just change my logic a little bit, or learn some new syntax, or some new like wrinkle in Flask or Jinja or any of those languages. So I actually was pretty fortunate that none of my struggles were super big. And all in all, I'm super happy with how my website turned out. I definitely think, oh, here you can see. So this white space, I actually had to put an if statement to manually add. But it works now. So yeah, I definitely think I'll keep adding to this website. I would love for other people to be able to see it and ideally use it in real life. And yeah, one last thing. So before I go, always a good idea to sign out of your account in case someone wants to use your computer. So press here to log out, and we are logged out once again. So that is my tour of my website, Marginal. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you found this interesting. I hope maybe you're a little more interested in poetry right now, or in how I made this. And yeah, that's Marginal. Thanks for watching.